Okay, so good evening, everyone. My name is Patricia Taylor. I am a Commercial Litigation Associate with DLA Piper and the Vice President of the Scottish Young Lawyers Association. I'm absolutely delighted to be chairing tonight's event alongside my SYLA colleague Amina Amin. Amina is an IPTC solicitor at McRoberts and the Treasurer of the SYLA. So thank you so much for joining us for the next instalment of the SYLA's widely attended So You Want to Be series, where tonight we'll be lending our focus to the promotion process, specifically being promoted to senior associate.
Hi everyone. So tonight we are joined by an expert panel of speakers who will explore their respective journeys to senior associate, the process they followed, the standards and milestones required to be met in advance of promotion, their additional responsibilities and the benefits of becoming a senior associate. We are pleased to welcome Rachel McCallum of Shoosmiths, Thomas Charnley of Taylor Wessing and Susan O'Farrell of McRoberts. Rachel, Tom and Susan are all senior associates.
Thank you, Amina. So to kick off tonight's discussion, I would firstly invite our speakers to tell us a little bit more about themselves and their careers to date. So a little bit about their day-to-day, the type of work you do, and any extracurricular interests that you might have, for example, some committees. So I'll come to Rachel first, please.
Hi everyone, so I'm Rachel McCallum. I'm a senior associate in Shoosmiths real estate department. I've been working in real estate sector for about 6 years now, having undertaken a real estate specific traineeship at a high street firm before moving across to Shoosmiths. I specialise mainly in commercial leasing, both for landlords and tenants, but acting predominantly for national occupiers, high street names, some of whom I'm sure you've heard of, Boots, Poundland, Lush, to name a few. I don't really have an average day, as I'm sure none of you really will, but you'll usually find me revising drafts, whether it's leases, minutes of variations, assignations, or all other sorts of weird and wonderful that comes across my desk, preparing lease reports, summaries, and speaking to clients. Outside of the fee earning side, I'm also a member of the Shoosmith Social Committee, which is fairly self-explanatory, and a member of the Shoosmiths Balance Committee, which is a gender network promoting equality in the workplace. I'm also a self-appointed social convener for the real estate department, which will come to no real shock for anyone that knows me. So yeah, that's where I'll stop.
Thank you, Rachel. And Tom, I'll come to you next, please.
Thanks, Patricia, and hi, everyone. So my name's Tom Charnley. I'm a senior associate in the Disputes and Investigations team at Taylor Wessing. I specialise in corporate and boardroom disputes generally, and have experience in professional negligence against solicitors, accountants, surveyors. I also, as part of my practice, deal with data breach response, and have experience of a couple of group litigation matters, so sort of class actions in the UK. I started my career at a regional firm in Leicester, and then shortly after qualifying, moved to DWF in Manchester. I think I'm probably the only south of the border person on this call, but and I stayed at DWF for about 6 years, where I progressed from solicitor to associate to senior associate, and then I joined Taylor Wessing in December last year. So I'm quite new at Taylor Wessing. Outside of my day job, I'm a non-exec director of Manchester Young Professionals, which it says all it needs to in the title, really. It's a cross-professional networking group that offers social, educational, and health and wellbeing events throughout the year. As I said, I'm 8 years qualified, so I'm moving potentially away from what would be regarded as a stereotypical young professional type event, as I do feel I've got far too many wrinkles in comparison to a lot of the attendees that I see at these great events that are organised in Manchester. Something else that I'm involved in is I'm a founding member of a new group called the Social Collective, based in Manchester, but hoping to come to other cities. And that is a group of business leaders in Manchester who are looking to continue to network and develop their contacts, but are possibly a little bit long in the tooth for your more stereotypical young professional events. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you so much, Tom. That sounds brilliant, the Social Collective. I'll need to look into that. Thank you. And Susan, last but not least.
Thanks so much. Evening, everyone. My name is Susan O'Farrell and I'm a Senior Associate in the Intellectual Property and Technology team at McRoberts. I started at McRoberts in 2011 as a trainee, and I've worked my way up the ranks, qualifying in 2013 and working up from solicitor to senior solicitor to associate and now senior associate. My day-to-day mostly consists of drafting, revising, reviewing commercial contracts, but I also advise a lot on intellectual property matters and IT. And my day can range from conducting an IP audit, drafting template documents, or advising on quite bespoke legal and commercial arrangements. We also advise a lot on disputes, so quite a varied workload. My week currently is a 3-day week. I only work part-time at the minute, and I've got 2 little girls as well. So currently kind of balancing the family life and the corporate life as well.
Thank you very much, Susan. So in the interest of setting the scene of the senior associate process, it would be helpful to understand what the process entailed at your respective firms. For example, was the matter raised with you during a meeting with your supervisor, or was it something that you put yourself forward for? At what stage of PQE did you begin working towards the senior associate promotion goal? And did you have to complete an application form/interview? If I could go to you first, Tom.
Thanks, Alina. So I first raised the promotion, a promotion to senior associate with my line manager during my year-end review. I'd already worked out that year-end reviews came early summer after sort of traditional financial year end, and I knew that the senior associate application was going to be at the end of the year. So I knew I had like a 6-month window in which, if I was going to be supported, I could follow the process. When I had gained that support. So I raised it with my line manager, and he immediately supported the proposition. I was around 5.5, 6 years qualified, and had been in my role as an associate for, at that point, around 2 years. So it was approximately 2.5 years in between positions. So once I got my line manager support, I had to fill out at DWF, where I was, a business case, which fortunately was page limited. So it wasn't going to be War and Peace, in the sense that you sometimes left with these massive forms that are probably quite scary when you look at them and you think, God, what am I going to write about myself? I don't like digging myself up generally, but fortunately it was page limited, so that wasn't too onerous. And there were various questions on this form. It was a pro forma. You were guided as to what they wanted, and it was a number of points, such as how do you meet the firm's core values in your day-to-day job. Obviously, what are you doing in respect of your KPIs, your billing, your hourly targets? I think that's probably a given, and in my experience, it's probably less important for what you put on the page. Obviously, you need to demonstrate that you are doing a good day-to-day job, but it's more about the softer skills and the work you're doing, your success stories, the profile hopefully you've raised internally and externally, and sort of historic wins that you've had, and success stories that you can put down on paper. The business case needed to be supported by not only my line manager, but the head of department and the practice area head. I think the roles were at the time. So I found myself having to approach these people as well to gain their buy-in and their support, and those conversations can be a little bit daunting, because effectively you're asking your boss's boss to promote you and stick their neck out on the line for you. But whilst they appear daunting before you have them, in my experience, they were really easy conversations once you get going, and it's nice to know that you've got more than one person backing you. I think it's quite common that yes, you have to have your line manager support, but they don't have the final say and they don't have the final sign off. It does go further up the chain, whether formally or informally. So it was important that I had my business case looked at by these people before I sort of clicked the final send button on version 10 or whatever it was. So that was my experience. And as I say, whilst daunting when you set out at the start of the process, you probably, if you're not going to be successful or your line manager thinks maybe you're another year away, it gets shut down quite quickly and they give you goals to work on. But if you are successful, it's not a horrific process in my experience. So there you go.
Thank you so much, Tom. Susan, if I could come to you next, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Well, the opportunity to consider promotion to senior associate came to me at a point in time when I probably wasn't particularly focused on my career progression. I was actually on maternity leave at the time, and I had been for almost a year at that point when my supervising partner had made contact with me to suggest that I should apply to become a senior associate so that I had the promotion on my return to work. So at that point, my focus and my priority was really my children, and I hadn't planned, if I'm honest, to apply for promotion for maybe another year or two. But due to some changes in the personnel in the team, including the departures at the time of our only senior associate, it meant there was an opportunity for me to kind of step into those shoes of that outgoing senior associate and adopt more responsibility within the team. So I did take that opportunity and I applied for promotion in 2021 when I was 8 years qualified. But at that point, I had been absent from work twice for maternity leave. So I had really had about 6 years in the office of that time. So the process at McRoberts is fairly similar to what Tom described there. We had to complete an application form. I had to have the backing of 2 of the partners within our practice group, and they also had to fill in a form to kind of support my application. And we had to undergo an interview process with 2 partners from different practice groups. And once that process was finished, the final decision was with the board. So similar to what Tom experienced, it was just a case of kind of setting out the business case and trying to justify to the wider firm why that promotion was beneficial to the team. And I personally found the process fairly easy, and I had a lot of support from the team that I was in to make that all happen.
Thank you, Susan. If I can come to you next, Rachel.
Thanks, Amina. Very, very similar experience to Tom. So Shoosmiths have got quite a specific process and specific deadlines that had to be met when it came to promotion. So it'd always sort of been in the back of my mind that I quite fancied doing it, but it was actually another member of my team, so not the partner, not my line manager, who said, oh, by the way, I think you should really go for this. I think you're sort of ready for the step. Personally, I didn't really feel like I was, but I thought, well, if someone else thinks it, then I'm just going to go for it. So after speaking to my colleague, he said, look, there's loads of information on the firm-wide portal. We've got a firm-wide portal. They set out all the steps, the time scales that you need to meet, all the rest of it. So I went away and did my research and then plucked up the courage to speak to my line manager about it at one of our sort of quarterly one-to-ones. And I felt so nervous about talking about it, but I really shouldn't have been, because I had the full support of my line manager straight away, which I was delighted about. So that then my sort of initial putting my name forward then also sort of had to be approved and supported by head of our department, who subsequently was also head of Scotland, and then head of real estate, so national real estate. So that all had to be sort of rubber marked before I could even start on my written application. So luckily I didn't have to make an approach to anyone in the way that Tom did, but I did have to wait for that to sort of be sort of semi signed off before I started the sort of longer process of preparing and submitting the written application, which was actually quite involved, although thankfully also page marked, so it was only, you could only submit about 4 pages, which I was also quite happy about. But I had really good support from my line manager on pulling both the written application and the business case together, which I really wouldn't have been able, well, I really would have struggled, I think, to complete all of that without their input. So I felt very lucky in that regard. So once the written application and the business case were pulled together, that then all has to go to the board for review. The same way that Tom said, you know, really, I think your line manager doesn't at the end of the day have the final say in it at all. There was scope for the board to request an interview at their discretion, but secretly, luckily for me, I didn't actually have to go for an interview, which I was delighted about. So yeah, so very similar process, and I was just over 3 years PQE when that all happened, when I got promoted.
Thank you so much, Rachel, and thanks to all our panelists. I think I, for one, feel quite reassured by how much support and guidance was offered throughout, so that's really helpful to hear. We've touched upon this briefly already, but to delve a little bit deeper, at your firms, is there a particular set of criteria that must be met before you are eligible to be promoted to senior associate? And could you please describe the criteria and your experience of meeting it? And in particular, one thing I just thought of there to somewhat differentiate this event from our event we had a couple of weeks ago, which was So You Want to Be an Associate. Are there business development type criterias that you had to maybe elaborate on in your applications? You know, I think that there's perhaps, I mean, you'll confirm, but perhaps wild rumors that you have to have brought in X amount of clients before you can meet that criteria to be promoted to SA. So what was your experience of that? And I'll come to Susan first, please.
So at McRoberts, the promotion form and the interview process centred around a few key areas. So I'll briefly touch on each of those and how I tried to kind of demonstrate that I had met them. So the first was financial performance. And as part of the application process, I had to demonstrate that my chargeable hours, my fee targets and my recovery rates were all above or around my targets. Now, at the time when I applied, I was working from historic figures as I had been off for a year. So I also had to try and demonstrate how I was planning on ensuring that my financial targets would be met on my return to work, which included re-engaging with existing kind of key clients and trying to engage in a business development plan. So obviously, if I had been just in the office, it would have solely looked at my figures. But because I had been absent there, I had to factor in a kind of future plan of how I was going to build that back up again. The second key area that I had to look at was client relationship management. So an important part of the process at McRoberts was being able to demonstrate that I had key clients that would come to me for advice and that I had a good working relationship with some of the key clients in the firm. Because obviously as you progress within a firm, it's vital that you can show that you're a key part and a key player in why clients either come to the firm or continue to seek advice. So that was a key area where I had to show that I had a key part in these kind of big clients and that I was a vital cog in the advice that they were getting. The next area I had to look at was marketing and business development. So to touch on what you just asked about, that was quite a key important area to look at. And I had to demonstrate that I had a business development plan, again, especially as I had been absent from the office. So my BD plan really looked at how I was going to build both my profile with backup within the firm and externally. So that included even things like kind of meeting having internal informal meetings with other practice groups to see where we could have some kind of internal business development and cross-selling. It was looking at key target areas and sectors that I wanted to build more of a profile in, and just re-engaging and building back up client relationships that I'd been building over the years. And the last point, which was quite a key part of the process, was looking at the overall contribution to the wider partnership and what impact I had in the firm as a whole. So things like participating in sector groups. I had created a kind of training program for our team and had been successfully running that for a number of years. I'd been a mentor to the junior members of the team, both formally and informally. So all of that was considered, as would kind of participation in committees and groups and things like that. So it was quite focused on kind of key aims, but I think the benefit of working at a kind of medium-sized firm that isn't so global and isn't such a big reach is that the people that were looking at these application forms and the people conducting my interview I had a working relationship with. So it was a case of trying to show them and use maybe examples of things that I'd worked on with them to demonstrate that I had a wider value to the firm and how that kind of promotion could benefit both the team but the firm as a whole. So I think that was the key areas that I had to focus on and demonstrate.
Thank you so much, Susan. That was incredibly helpful. Rachel, if I could come to you next, please.
Yeah, so Shoosmiths have also got very specific criteria that's got to be met, not necessarily around sort of how qualified you are or not necessarily about the financial side, but quite a lot on the sort of operational level, your technical ability, and quite a lot on the soft skills and what you're like as a person and what you contribute personally to the team. So the sort of key areas for focus or the sort of promotion steps that you're told to sort of look towards is, you know, what kind of person are you in the team? You know, you should be a sort of go-to person. You understand how the firm works. You've got, you know, more than a competent knowledge of area in your specific field, and you can undertake sort of wider technical advice without being supervised. So that's more on the sort of technical side. On the operational side, there's things like setting a good example for the team, understanding the systems within the business, understanding the policies and procedures within the business, being able to contribute to discussions about, you know, moving the firm forward. What can we do to be innovative? What can we do to be more efficient in the team? Again, what Susan touched on, knowing the you know, you have to know a bit about the partnership itself, the structure of the partnership, and knowing the structure firstly, but also understanding the structure and where you sit, and you know where you sit in that, and if you want to move up, where you go next. Values are obviously very important. Each firm will have its own set of values, sort of living and breathing. The values are sort of the most important thing, I think, when it comes to your promotion. That's what they're going to be looking for you to put on your application form. These are the values, and these are how I'm demonstrating them. This is what I'm doing that shows that I'm, you know, Shoosmiths through and through, or whatever your firm is. Then there's a sort of business aspect of it, you know, maintaining the client through delivery of work that's done timely, professionally, competently, obviously hitting your relevant KPIs, your fee targets, your time recording targets. That's all got, well, at Shoosmiths anyway, and I think Susan had said similarly at McRoberts, that's all got to be put on your application form. So for me, when I sort of reviewed the criteria, I found for the most part that I was sort of already doing everything that was on there, more or less, and the things that I didn't feel that I was hitting quite yet, I just spoke through with my line manager and said, you know, what can I do to meet this? We discussed ways to do that, and that was a really positive experience for me. And I do think the support of a good line manager is sort of worth its weight in gold for these things, because there's so much information, so much criteria that's out there, particularly at Shoosmiths, where you've got to hit all these certain things and be doing these certain things. And you also might not think, you might read the criteria and think, well, I'm not sure I am doing that. But then when you speak to your line manager, they're saying, oh no, actually, what they're looking for is this, and you are actually already doing that. So I think those conversations are really helpful. If you've got the good support of a line manager, I think it's worth its weight in gold.
Thank you so much, Rachel. It's so helpful and really complemented the tips that Susan provided too. Before I come to Tom and ask about his experience of the criteria, I just wanted to open up a question to the panel based on something that you said, Rachel, because you know I'm in a similar situation to you where I have a fantastic line manager, but I wonder, is there a support role there from HR or other members of your team that you can go to that you know would supplement if you didn't have the sort of support of a line manager? Or is it absolutely crucial that in order to be promoted you have line manager support, because there might be, you know, other relationship factors at play?
I think certainly at Shoosmiths, the first person that needs to tick the box is your line. The first person that needs to tick the box is your line manager. So I'm sure there must be, you know, if you don't get on with your line manager or you don't have a good relationship with your manager, you know, that shouldn't halt your route to promotion. So I think there must be other routes if you don't. But I certainly at Shoosmiths, the first text box has got to come from your line manager. So I suppose if you feel you're not getting the support from your line manager, then that would be the time to sort of speak to HR. Or at Shoosmiths, we've also got sort of like buddies in the office, you know, sort of buddies in the office. So I would, that would be a time to maybe speak to your buddy about it, or I suppose speak to head of department or head of the office rather than just your line manager. Because yeah, I mean, your relationship with your line manager should never sort of halt your progress within the firm, in my view anyway.
Thank you, Rachel. No, I absolutely agree. It was just in case there was anyone sitting on the call, which I hope isn't the case, but in case anyone was sitting on the call going, well, that's me and my chances of promotion rubbered. But yes, hopefully not, but at least there's other options out there. Tom, if I could come to you for a note of your criteria now.
Yeah, so very similar to Rachel and Susan's in the sense that prove that you're living to the firm's values, prove that you can satisfy KPIs and the like. And I think a really important point that Rachel effectively touched on is that hopefully by the time you go through the process and you've been given the green light by your line manager or whoever it may be, it's easy to demonstrate that that you're already acting in the role of senior associate in all but title. I think that makes writing your form probably or your business case probably that bit easier, because if you are confident that you should be promoted and you want that promotion, you should be able to demonstrate that you're already doing all the things that the job title you're going to be stepping into requires of you. And I found, which I only started doing maybe 5 years qualified, which I never did before, but now I do it religiously, is every time you do something good, or you get an internal referral, or you go to a CSR event or a BD event, or go out for a coffee with a client, a work referrer, an accountant, for me, a barrister, etc. Every time you do that, just do a 1-sentence note on your computer or your to-do list or however people make notes, because then when you come to actually write your business case, you refer back to that, and you've got all of these things that are really, really good, that are quite easy to forget. Personally, I will be adding this event that we're doing right now as panelists, but also if I was an attendee, I'll be writing it, because it shows you that you are ambitious and keen to share knowledge with people. So I think in terms of informal criteria, being able to have a log of all the good things that you do, and if it's a bad thing, i.e. a bit of work didn't go right, or you were dealing with a difficult client, which all clients generally are, how did you overcome that difficulty? How would you approach it next time? And all those sort of things, because no one's perfect. No one's the best lawyer in the world that is able to generate millions of pounds worth of fees. Everyone's got areas that they can improve on. So that's sort of what you've done today at the point of your business case. But then a lot of my business case, or certainly half of it, was what I would be doing in the future to cement my promotion, hopefully. And that was quite specific in terms of sector focus. I want to prioritize developing my role in my team in the TMC sector, or real estate sector, or IP sector, whichever sector. Well, obviously each firm has different sectors that they are keen on, but whichever sector that you have a personal interest in, say why you've got an interest in it, and how you're going to build your practice in that sector. Now that's very difficult as someone who is an associate or a solicitor going into the senior associate role, because you're not. It's a hard question to answer. How you're going to build this practice area when you might only be quite junior in a 35-year, 40-year career. But I suppose it's small steps, isn't it? It's if you're interested in the technology sector, having a relationship with someone in commercial, another colleague in the commercial team, say, that does a lot of work and writes a lot of contracts for their clients in the technical in the appropriate sector. So I think it's about little steps. You're not going to be, as I say, bringing in multi-million-pound clients from day one of senior associate, but it's showing to people who approve your form effectively what you can bring to the table and the sort of things that you're going to look to do to develop yourself going forward. And I think just on your question, Patricia, about what happens if you don't have your line manager support, and I think everyone thinks that must immediately mean you don't have a very good relationship with your line manager. It might just mean that your line manager is so busy, and unfortunately the career progression of their team is not at the top of their list, and that is really difficult. And I suppose, touching on what Rachel said, you can go to maybe another partner in the team if you don't have another partner in the team. HR possibly. A point that I will probably touch upon later is I'm a big advocate of mentorship. Get a mentor in the firm in a different practice area, and lean on them for their advice about how best to approach that. And it might just need to be a difficult conversation as to, look, I'm really ambitious. I want to go through this process, and I need you to support me. And if you don't, let's talk about it. Let's talk about what I can do over the next year, 2 years to get you to a point where you will support me.
Thank you, Tom. That was very insightful. I'll definitely be taking that OneNote tip going forward. So just moving on to the interview process, Susan, I know that you had mentioned that there was an interview required. It would be helpful to get an understanding as to the format of the interview, the sort of questions asked, and any tips to get the most out of your interview.
Yeah, well, as I had said before, I did have to complete an interview, but I was quite lucky because the two partners that held the interview I had an opportunity to work with. One, as when I was a trainee, I worked in their team, and the other was our tax partner. So I'd worked with her really closely on quite a number of matters. So they were already familiar with my work within the team. They were familiar with my kind of wider firm activities. I had worked with them on matters, so they saw how I interacted with clients. So that was quite a kind of big benefit to having the partners that were doing the interview, having had a bit more prior knowledge of how I work and my experience. But one of the key areas that I was questioned on, and this is kind of, if I had to offer one piece of advice about the interview process, is think about, before you're even asked, before you even start the application process, think about the reason that your promotion is going to benefit the team and the firm. If you can come up with a good reason why your promotion is going to be beneficial to the firm as a whole and to your team, then that gives the ultimate person making the decision that first step to want to promote you, because you're demonstrating from the get-go that there is a good business case there. And that could be a wide variety of reasons. So in my case, there was obviously a recent departure had kind of left a bit of a skills gap and a gap in terms of responsibility, mentoring, overseeing work. And I had obviously quite a large range of experience within the team. I'd worked with all the partners in the team. I'd worked across a lot of the sectors. So it did allow me to kind of demonstrate and pull together everything I'd worked on over the years and the skills and experience that I had and the mentoring I'd carried out to show that I did have that kind of skill set to step up and perform that role. But I think in terms of when you think about that question and when you're asked that question at interview, I know Rachel had said that she found it quite hard to try and kind of vocalise all the positives about her work and why she should be promoted. And I think a lot of us find that we don't want to sit and say, well, I'm fantastic and look at all my, it's really hard. You always want to kind of play down what you're doing and be a bit more modest. So I think that if you can look at like your key skills, it doesn't have to be that you're the person with the best targets and the KPIs that have been smashed beyond any other team member. It can be looking at how the team is structured at the time, if there's a kind of responsibility gap, if there's an opportunity to take on a kind of more mentoring role for the junior members, if there's a skills gap that's came up where someone maybe within the team's starting to focus on a different area and there's an opportunity for you to step in and take more of a key role in advising on that area. So there's lots of ways that you could look at and frame it to think how you could benefit the team and the firm and how your promotion will benefit the team and the firm. For me personally, a lot of the things that I was questioned on an interview were kind of how I saw my role, how I saw myself if I was to gain the promotion, how that would be be beneficial to the more junior team members, how I could assist the partners more, how I could be more focused and more kind of progressive, I suppose, in my BD approach. So all those matters I had to really think about. But I think when you have got that personal relationship with the partners, it takes away that first step of just trying to prove your worth. They've worked with you. They know that you can do your job. You're not sitting there if you can't. They know that you've got hopefully partner backing and partner support. And I think it's ultimately just about trying to take the modesty out of it and just try and lay out your achievements quite bare, lay out that anything that you see in the team or the firm where there is maybe an opportunity for you to step in and take that role, and just try and capitalize on that. And I think even if there's many elements that sometimes even has been a more stabilizing role in a team that have maybe been a bit unsettled, or there's been a lot of departures for, being just a kind of balanced member of the team that can calm the stress when the workload's heavy. All of those things are key factors, and I think that we all downplay those areas. We all downplay the personal side of things, but just try and capitalize on any strengths you have, and make sure that that does come out in the interview process, because you get one chance at it, and you want to just put your best foot forward, even if it is quite a kind of awkward situation to be in.
Thank you so much, Susan. That is incredibly helpful. I don't think I'd looked at it from that perspective before. So yeah, incredibly helpful. Thank you. Excuse me. So our next question is, how has your role changed and developed since becoming a senior associate? So what new responsibilities have you taken on, and what are the key benefits of taking up the mantle of senior associate? And if I can come to Tom first, please.
Thanks, Patricia. I certainly don't mean to scare anyone, but I felt like the jump that I had personally between solicitor and associate and senior associate was quite different, in the sense that from a work point of view, you're obviously, as you'd expect, given more and more day-to-day control and responsibility on files, with less and less partner input and supervision. In my experience, effectively, here you get given a case, and in the nicest way possible, the partner says, come to me when you've got questions, rather than come to me when you want me to tell you how to do it, really, if that makes sense. It's a lot less hand-holding, but the skill that is important and potentially difficult to develop at that point is the judgment call on when to then go and seek the partner help. It might be on a draft that you're a little bit unsure of, might not strike the right tone, and you think I should probably go and get that looked at, or it might be a strategy decision that you think, actually I would like someone who's just got more experience to confirm, hopefully, what I think is the answer. But I think, yeah, day-to-day responsibility in terms of access to clients, referrers, barristers, and the like, you are given much more sort of free rein to do those sort of contacts, meetings, teams, calls on your own, which is good, because if you are an ambitious budding lawyer, you want that responsibility. But the difficulty, which is a learning curve, is just finding the balance between seeking partner input. From a more, I suppose, pastoral for me sense, I think senior associate is the sweet spot between junior and partner, where you are a conduit between them, because you end up supervising more of the juniors with limited partner input, and you can be hopefully sort of a friend for those juniors, and a ear to give gripes to, complain about things, and then you're in that responsible role where you're overseeing juniors in a team, and if something's not happy, if somebody's not happy about something, they don't want to raise it with the partner, it's you can be that go-between, just sort of offer support in a way where you might have conversations with the partner on an anonymous basis, or informally that a junior person might not want to have. So you can be that go-between, I think, in a pastoral sense. And then I think a final point for me on the role, how it's changed, is sort of internal referrals, which I think are very important and very good to put down on any business case and the like. But I'm finding more and more that partners or other peers at my level are coming to me internally with new matters and or questions, or whether informally or formally, which has changed since I've sort of climbed up the career ladder. And I think that's something that you should start to expect more and more when you get to sort of SA level. And that's the internal referrals coming directly to you, which is only positive, and another thing to put down on your OneNote for when the next business case comes around, because unfortunately there are more and more levels that you've got to keep climbing if you want to.
Thank you very much, Tom. Very insightful as ever. I also thought this would be an appropriate juncture just to say to our audience members, if you have any questions that you'd like to pose to the panel, please do just post them into the chat box, or at the end of the sort of presentation discussion, do feel free to pop your mic on and your camera on and pose the question to the panelists. And with that, I will come to Susan now on that particular question.
I think it depends, I suppose, on how you've actually been promoted and your kind of route to promotion as to how different you'll find the role. On a personal level, for myself, I'd worked in the team for quite a lot of years before promotion. I'd been in the team for 10 years. I'd seen a few changes. I'd worked with the partners for all that time. So I didn't see any particular immediate changes overnight, because I felt I had been kind of steadily gaining more autonomy and more responsibility as the years had went on. And I hadn't particularly pushed for the promotion of senior associate because, as I say, I knew I was pregnant. I was focusing a lot on family life at that point. So I probably had been adopting a lot of the kind of senior associate roles as an associate and just not looking for the recognition of the title at that point. So when I was promoted, I didn't feel a massive jump overnight, but I do think that the biggest thing that I noticed was how clients would perceive you. So I think especially when you maybe come across as a kind of younger person on a call, I've had experience where clients have been a bit more reticent to speak to you and ask if you've got a partner that's overseeing, or how much experience do you have in this area, because they just see someone that is maybe slightly younger and they question your ability and your experience. Whereas I think when you do start to get more kind of senior titles, it does give clients a bit more confidence that you do have that experience behind you and that you have worked your way up the ranks. So that's probably the biggest change that I particularly noticed. But I do think what Tom said in terms of being a kind of conduit between the partners and the wider team is really, really important. I myself feel that I still really relate to the experiences that the junior members of the team are having. I still remember it very clearly. I remember the stress that they are feeling. I remember the kind of worry that surrounds certain circumstances. And I think that that's something that you can lose, maybe not just becoming partner, but over years and years of doing the same job and having different priorities. And I also think as a senior associate, you've got an extra level of responsibility, but it's definitely not to the partner level, and you don't have any of those kind of financial burdens that the partners are thinking of and the extra kind of pressures of running the business that they're thinking of. So it does allow you to focus a little bit more on the work and on business development and on building the team, whereas and allow the partners to kind of do their role. So I think it is quite a nice level to be at, but I think it depends on, as I say, how you've reached it, whether you do kind of strive for that promotion and really fight for it, and you might notice a change in responsibility, or whether you kind of work gradually up to it and then it is more of a gradual change and there's not as much of a switch when the title comes.
Thank you so much, Susan. And Rachel, I'll come to you next.
So my sort of experience is sort of somewhere in between Tom and Susan, I think. So I definitely know I was, as someone who is sort of fairly ambitious, I sort of did see a change in responsibility. I did see a sort of switch, I think, more like what Tom had said. So there was a bit more responsibility. There's more being a support to other junior members of the team, and sort of doing that sort of middleman role, as you've said, between junior members of the team and the sort of really senior members of the team and partners. And I suppose from a transactional perspective, it's sort of just being allowed to get on with it and not really be having the supervising and the sort of hand holding that Tom said. And yet exactly what Tom said as well, about knowing if and when you do need partner support, making that judgment call about when it's required, not having to copy the partner into every email that you're sending, and sort of just running the transactions as if they're your own without any other input. From a sort of benefits point of view, I suppose a key benefit for me, firstly, the sort of from the ambitious side, obviously sort of climbing up at a relatively early stage in my career was something I was extremely proud of. But the biggest benefit for me is really being someone in the team that other junior solicitors can turn to for support. Because when I was a trainee, I worked under a fab senior solicitor who really helped me so much. No question was too silly. Where I trained was quite a small practice, so there was sort of me, the senior solicitor, and then the partner. So she really was the sort of go-between, and she really helped shape my traineeship and the sort of solicitor that I think that I'm sort of growing into be, and the sort of shape of my career. And I think if I can sort of be that for someone else, then my job here is done. So that for me has been the best part of it, really. So yeah, it's nice to help others when you feel that you've really been helped out at the start of your career. And no one knows it all as well. I mean, sometimes you will still have to ask the partner sort of tail in hand, but few and far between, hopefully.
Thank you, Rachel. So just moving on to our final question, which I will open to all of our panelists. Do you have some final tips for any budding senior associates in our audience?
I go for it. Well, my mic's still
Go
on.
for it, Rachel.
So I think three things that I'll say. So one is embody your firm's values. That's what they're looking for in a promotee. Who's living and breathing the values? How are you demonstrating that you're doing X, Y, Z? I think that's a biggie. Number two is don't forget about your personal side, the soft skills. What committees are you part of? Are you a good team player? How are you supporting others in the team? If you've got capacity, are you helping others out? Are you taking part in CSR? All those things are equally as important, I think, as the sort of values and financial side. You can be hitting your targets left, right, and centre, but if you're really not a team player, I think you're probably going to struggle to get promoted, because you can't just look good on paper. You've got to be a team player, and you've got to be doing other bits and bobs around the firm. Have you organized at Shoesmiths, have you organized a night out? Are you part of what committees are you on? All that stuff is super important. And the last one is don't let imposter syndrome take over, because I am very guilty of this. I remember my stomach was in knots when I wanted to speak to my line manager at that first one-to-one about being promoted, but you can do it. You're there for a reason. And if all the first boxes have been ticked and you've managed to get to sort of written application stage, then you're pretty much halfway there. Your line managers, I wouldn't suspect, is going to let you go down that road if they don't think that you're ready for it, and if they don't think you're going to get the promotion. So you can do it. There's my end of my TED talk.
Thank you, Rachel. Susan, can I come to you next?
Yeah, I was going to say I also have 3 tips, so I think that must be the, the theme. I don't know how many Tom's got, but my first tip, and I mentioned it earlier, would be to try and just capitalise on your strengths. So not everyone is bringing in lots of new business, not everyone's comfortable doing lots of BD. Some people don't have a personal life that allows for long hours that can lead to the kind of smashing targets. Your strengths might be more subtle. You might be really central to the team you're in. You might be the person people come to for support or advice, or you might be really knowledgeable in your area of law, and you might be the contact for internal referrals, as you're seen as a kind of trustworthy and steady hand on a matter. So don't worry if you don't have the best BD record or the best figures in the team. A good team needs a mixture of all types of people, and I think if you can recognise what strength you can bring and play to that strength. That will make you indispensable, and it will show that you have value that's kind of separate to the figures on a page. The second thing is, I think Tom had touched on it earlier, kind of keeping a list of all your activities, your successes, things like that. I would really echo that. One of the mentors that I had at the start of my career told me I should create a table after every appraisal with a box for each area that was meant to be my kind of target focus for that year, and a box for every month. And every month I should go through and fill out all my activities for each box of my appraisal process. And that meant that I would know any BD or events activities I went to or participated in. I would know any kind of internal cross-selling that I managed to do. I would know any examples of big clients that came to me without copying in a partner because I was their point of contact. I would know kind of key areas or key contacts that I'd been particularly involved with, or big cases that I'd worked on. And it meant that when it came to appraisals or promotion processes, I had this bank that I could just kind of point to say, here's examples of everything I've done every month. It showed that I had been really thinking about how I could be a good team member throughout the whole year, and not just scrambling for examples at the end or at the promotion process trying to fill an application. It showed that I had really been, as Rachel had said, kind of living the values of the firm and really considering how my work could impact and how my activities could impact the team. So I think that was a really great piece of advice I got, and I would recommend doing that because it saves yourself a lot of time at promotion processes, but it also does allow you to take away that kind of modesty step, because you don't have to then blow your own trumpet. You can give them your tables for the last 3 years and show them what you've done. And I think my last kind of key kind of tip is to try and use the opportunity of having a little bit more seniority to just set boundaries and make sure that you've got the kind of work-life balance that you want, because I know in the legal profession it is really hard to do that. It's often expected that you will work long hours, and I think when you reach senior associate level, you hopefully have had a chance to prove yourself over the years. You've kind of proved your worth, and I think it's a good opportunity to take a bit more control of your workload, to take a bit more management of time, and just really focus on what's important to you in your life, and make sure that you're not just prioritizing career, you're not prioritizing family, that you've got the balance that allows you to really strive in both without burning out. So that would be my last piece of advice, but it's quite a hard one to balance.
Thank you, Susan. That was honestly fantastic. If I can go to you next, Tom, thank you.
Yeah, no, I echo what Rachel and Susan have suggested in sort of hot tips. I think they're all of them are true. I only have two, though, I'm afraid, not three. One is, I think internal profile is just as important as external profile. You can be written up in all the directories as an amazing lawyer, but I think having an internal profile, showing your face at, it might be something after work, it might be something before work, it might be something at lunchtime. Throwing yourself into as much as you can, but equally, as Susan rightly says, you might not be able to do everything, which is absolutely fine. But internal profile, build it as best you can. Talk to people, call people with your camera on, and literally just catch up with people. Say, what type of work do you do? I'm interested in this, I'm interested in that. Do you have anything that you do that's similar to me that we can work together on, etc.? So that's tip number one, internal profile. And then tip number two, which I've touched on and Susan did too, is try and get a mentor. I'm a big advocate of mentorship. I've had some great mentors in my career to date, and I just think they're a really useful sounding board and informal peer to guide you through the trials and tribulations of being a lawyer, because there are many. Lots of firms offer mentoring programs, but even if they don't, approach someone, because I think they'll be generally very flattered to be approached, and it can be a really useful friend in a generally difficult corporate world, just to have someone who, you don't have to do a formal meeting every month or whatever. You can reach out to them every quarter or whatever and have an hour catch up, have a walking meeting, have a Zoom call. It's just nice to know that you've got someone informally, confidentially on your side. They're my two hot tips.
Thank you so much. And I have to say, when Tom and I worked together at DWF, he was one of my internal mentors, whether he knew that or not. So I can vouch for it. It's very helpful. I've not seen any questions coming through in the chat. So I think it's just left to me to say, on behalf of the SYLA, we'd like to extend our thanks to our panelists, Rachel, Tom and Susan, for joining us this evening, and of course to our members for your engagement with the event. I have learned a lot and I hope you have too. And if there's any follow-up questions, do feel free to message the SYLA inbox and we'll see what we can do with those. And I'll stop the recording now and enjoy the rest of your evenings. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thanks.
Thank you.